kick it off. Welcome. This is our weekly market update for Rainbow Trends. Full disclaimer: this is not intended to be used as education, or not to be used as financial advice. It's meant to be used for educational purposes only. Even if you were to mistake this for financial advice, it should be considered god awful advice. We're going to be focusing on a lot of anime tonight. That's not related to any of this stuff. But as you guys know me, my charts are covered in paint. We do rainbow trends all the time, and if you want to know what's going on, check us out on the website. We've got all the write-ups, all the videos, and stuff like that. But tonight we're going to have a guest on stream. So we've got our buddies. This is doing an intro to one of my top guys that I've come across during this entire industry and consider a really good friend at this point. And just wanted to introduce you guys tonight to him. I kind of call him 9K. Most people call him SWO. But if you could check your mic and say hello, 9K, that'd be great.
What's up, ladies and gents? Happy to be here. I am looking forward to chatting with you guys. And Rainbow, thanks, Rainbow Runner, thanks for having me on your show. And not financial advice, so definitely important caveat. And I was just telling him that I'm coming in unscripted, so if I go off on a random tangent, then that's probably why.
Yeah, so thank you for that, 9K. This is completely unscripted. He doesn't know what I'm going to ask him, so we'll keep it frosty, but keep it friendly. This is a good dude. And I wanted to kind of do an intro because there's been a lot of stuff that I've talked to about a long time in kind of the past few months, and kind of alluding to a message that I really wanted to bring here is like, it's all about, to me, there's a lot of alpha in building a trusted circle and setting it up to where you vet your circle and you trust your circle and you're there for your guys. You're always there to back them, and they'll back you, and not try to be the guy who's got 1,000 discords open up at all time and you can't navigate what's going on and trying to follow every crypto Twitter celebrity there is. And I've always said, I've been preaching also as well, is like, know your dudes and like definitely learn how to read them. And that was one of the big messages I learned from 9K this year, because I discovered him and his group back in like 2017 as like kind of an outlier, as I was trying to find like different discords and different dudes to listen to and try to learn from. And I started whittling down like all the different discords until I kind of just stayed in Moonshot and kind of deleted all the others, and or watched the other ones kind of destroy themselves in the bear markets. And that's where I learned a lot of the stuff in regards to like, your team is really your alpha, and that's really like your foundation. People will bring you stuff and help you, and you can help them, and you know, the deadlier you can make your friends, the deadlier they're going to make you. And I literally found out all these people and Twitter and all these paid groups ended up just being scammers or people talking trash. And then I found this really funny group of dudes who were actually like heavy hitters and consistent. And I didn't know these guys at the time, didn't trust them, but I a red flag went off, and I was like, hey, something's different here. And frankly, I said, like, I told some other friends, I was like, I don't think this should exist. And that's when I first started running into like T and Me, Hot Pins, 9K, and his whole group of dudes. And it just was real consistent. And I learned a lot from them, and I'm in a way better place from the lessons I've learned from them, and likewise, I've tried to bring stuff to the table with them. So the goal from tonight is, you know, Moonshot knows 9K, but a lot of the Rainbow guys kind of only know him as a stranger per se, but someone that I talk highly of. And my goal is for you guys in this kind of interview to know the 9K that I know, and kind of see like some of the lessons and learnings and stuff like that. Because if you look deep enough behind a lot of the funny stuff, because we like to shitpost all the time, there's no secret, there's real alpha there. This is one of the few quants that I've ever come across in crypto that I take seriously, and can do a lot of coding and do a lot of vetting. And a lot of times he's helped me out in ways he shouldn't have or even spent the time on. And I've had to like vet stuff with him that like, hey, I'm in a bind. I don't know what to do with this. What do you expect? Whether that's, you know, business deals or anything, you know, crypto related stuff like that. So wanted to just get that intro out of the way because you guys, a lot of guys know him who are going to be watching this, and there's a lot of people that don't know him as well, but know that I talk a lot about Moonshot in the 9K group. So I just want to kind of marry that conversation. But first question I wanted to start off and kind of kick this off after the intro is what are your favorite top 12 seed phrases?
You're really gonna ask me that? Um, well, it certainly got the word ramen in there because we gotta represent. And well, I don't know. I don't think I've ever honestly I don't think I've ever written down a seed phrase like on paper. They always tell you write the seed phrases down on paper, and I just roll with it, and I just don't even record. I don't make a backup copy. So one day I'm gonna lose my wallets. So if that happens, it's the truth. It's not me dodging the IRS.
I actually did see a guy posting like, "Hey, I don't think Bitcoin's that secure. I've been trying to guess seed phrases for the past half hour, and I've already guessed two of them, but the wallets are empty." But really though, on a serious thing, the one thing I've always kind of wanted to walk through with you and a lot of other people is you're coming into like your third cycle, and a lot of people take that for granted. A lot of people can't comprehend that. So I was wondering if you could back us up and walk us through like your first cycles going through crypto, because I know you got into it well before I did, and kind of some of the lessons you learned from there. Because I've watched evolution of like all these different people that you and I both kind of know, and we're really starting to see some crazy stuff go down this cycle that are like amazing, not heart sob stories. So I'm just curious if you could try to unpack some of that and walk us through it.
Oh yeah, sure, sure. I mean, if you guys want to sit through some ancient history and an old man telling tales, but I'd be happy to bestow some of that history on you guys. I always say third cycle because it's the third cycle that I actually am trading shit coins, not just Bitcoin. But technically, I mean, if you wanted to count my first foray into Bitcoin, it would be the fourth cycle because I entered this space by buying the top of Mount Gox in December of 2013 when it hit 1200 and it dipped to sub 1000 and it was like 900 something. I was like, oh man, I've been missing this out. First time I heard about Bitcoin, it was $7 and I thought I was going to buy some, but I said, yo, this magic internet money's more than a real dollar. Fuck that. I wasn't buying any of that, scam money, and I missed out. So when it went to 1,000 something dollars, it was crazy. And then when it dipped below that, I said, here's the opportunity. And we all know how that goes when you think it's a dip and it keeps dipping. So ended up being a bag holder, very long time, and it fell dramatically and very quickly. Mount Gox obviously imploded, and I just said I'm gonna write this off. I just decided to hold, which was great. That was the best decision of my life because being a bag holder, it turned out to all come back roaring in the 2016, 2017, 20 kind of 2018 cycle, but mainly the 2017 cycle, um, which got all my Bitcoin back in value plus some. But it was really me getting into Ethereum that truly kicked off the degeneracy, and I had no idea what I was doing, honestly. I mean, I got shilled Ethereum in 2015 at a best friend's wedding, and it was his little brother, and he was telling me this whole thing about Ethereum and smart contracts. I didn't understand what the hell he was talking about. All I know is my Bitcoin was in the shitter, and I was losing money. So I thought it was just another shit coin. I wasn't getting into this ICO thing. I didn't know what the hell it was. And it wasn't until a year later, 2016, on a business trip when I encountered a um, old high school buddy I haven't seen in a long time, and I just like made a random post on Facebook, and he commented because I was traveling. He was like, "Oh, you're in town? Let's go grab a drink." And I really didn't want it because I was jet lagged and sleepy and tired, but I went, and it turns out that he brought up Ethereum, and this was a separate individual. The second instance I heard about Ethereum, and it piqued my interest, and he explained to me, and I always remember this because he's a day trader, so he worked on Wall Street, became a day trader. He's telling me about Ethereum, and I always remember he said the reason why Ethereum would be a bullish bet is because you can make other assets, other we called it like pseudo stocks at the time, and we were thinking in terms of stocks. So you can make stocks on them, which in other words are the ERC 20 tokens, which would catalyze way more interest and speculation and trading. And he says that Ethereum is probably going to explode because of that, because people are degenerate gamblers, and he's a day trader, and he vibed with that. And he was right. He was right. And I bought some. It was $7 at the time, which was kind of funny because it comes full circle to the first time I heard about Bitcoin, $7. And it was, an excellent bet. I bought a little bit, not too much. I think at the time I bought um, what, like $2,000 worth. It was like 300 ETH or something, and I was very happy about it. I was very happy about it. I went back. I was like, yeah, okay, this sounds really great. Makes a lot of sense. Good narrative, and it's so funny because we talk about narrative and mindshare all the time these days, but like that guy, my buddy, that then in 2016, like he understood narrative. So props to him. But I went back and I was proud of my 300 ETH, and I hit up my best friend's little brother, and I was like, "Yo, man, remember when you told me about the ETH ICO? I finally bought some." And he's like, "Dope." And he's like, "How much did you buy?" And I was like, a couple hundred. I got 300. I was like, "How about you?" And he says to me, 7,000. I'm like,
Dear
"What?
Lord.
7,000?" So he got, I think he threw in like 2 Bitcoin at the time to the ICO, and he got 7,000 ETH for it, and it was like 22 cents, 23 cents. I was like, um, I didn't want to miss out on Bitcoin again, because I had that experience of missing out when it was $7. And I said, man, I can't let this little brother of my best friend, outshine me. I'm gonna go and buy as much as I can as well. So I made it my goal to buy, 7,000 just like him. But I wasn't that rich back then, so I ended up never making it to 7,000. Um, but I did accumulate you know, um, starting from I did immediately buy 1,000 because at the time the Ethereum Foundation, Vitalik, he said that one day we're going to go to proof of stake, and you're going to need 1,000 ETH to run a proof of stake.
Holy cow.
And that was then. Now it's 32, but at that time it was 1,000. So that was like the reference value and the reference number. So I said I got to have 1,000 then. So and it worked out because that 32 requirement didn't come around for quite a while. I think not until like late 2018, maybe, or maybe even was 2020. I don't remember. It was like way later. And because of that, I force held 1,000 ETH, at least 1,000 ETH. I mean, I ended up buying more and more and selling Bitcoin for ETH because I bought into the flippening talk. But it was an excellent sort of reference point for me because holding 1,000 ETH, at least 1,000 ETH, because of the narrative, allowed me to hold it all the way from $7 to 1,400, which was the top of the run at 2017. And so that was like the first $1 million I made on paper. And we all know what happens when it's your first mega win into the space. And I mean, I did sell. I sold at $800 or something, and I was very proud of myself. And with all the other shit coins added together, I must have had $1 million. And I was like, man, I'm at this young age in my 20s. I mean, it was my late 20s. I was like, I got $1 million, and I got greedy. I got greedy, and just like everybody else, when they first get their big win in crypto, you buy the dip, and so the dip came at $700. Bought that, kept dipping, bought some more at 500, kept dipping, bought some more at 400, kept dipping, bought some more at 300, and kept dipping, and I basically became a bag holder all the way down to $80. And I sold a whole bunch. I sold a whole bunch at the bottom. I mean, I had like 3,000 ETH at one point, and I ended up buying back and selling, buying back and selling, and I started selling at losses. So we all know how that goes.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then I got introduced to leverage. That was very degenerate. I mean, I ended up winning, but not more than, very much not more than if I had just held spot the entire time. So leverage is very tempting. Not a lot of people are good at it. You can be good at it at very short briefs or spurts, but it's very hard to be very good at leverage consistently. So I learned my lesson going into the 2020 2021 cycle, and definitely went less on leverage.
What was the leverage options in that time frame? Mainly Binance or
Oh no, and the Binance wasn't even the thing yet for leverage. It was primarily BitMEX. And that was super degenerate. And
Mr.
because you
Hayes?
weren't losing, yeah, and Arthur Hayes, he had X-ray order books. He was trading against everybody, but you kind of knew it, you heard about it, and you just, sort of said, oh, I can still beat that market anyway. And I mean, I made out in the end, but very much if I had just held it, I would have made way more because I lost a lot of Bitcoin along the way.
Yeah.
Because BitMEX at the time, they were all inverse perps. That was like the default. You couldn't put USDT, and it was just Bitcoin trading for Bitcoin. So if you got liquidated, you lost your Bitcoin like permanently. So I lost a lot of Bitcoin and ETH along the way because then I got into Deribit, which was like the first one for ETH, using ETH as a collateral, and uh, and I was like, I'm gonna make all my ETH back, and I ended up making like 3,000 ETH because I on that April 2019 Dead Cat rally, all the way into July, I longed like at $120 entry on ETH, and I just held and held and held, and I took like 1,000 ETH position on low leverage or something,
Holy cow.
held it for and made like a couple thousand ETH. I said, oh man, I'm about to make my million back, and I was going to cash out when I had $1 million worth of ETH, and it hit 960K, and then I never crossed the 1 million, and it just kept going down,
Oh
and I just
man.
held and held and held until I got liquidated. So I lost
Full
a
round
thousand
trip.
ETH in that
That's
total
what
round trip.
that's why I tell
Well, not
people
just
it's
round trip. I
oh
got
yeah.
liquidated, so I lost my principal. Um,
Oh damn.
so anyway, long story short, I ended up with way less ETH than I should have. I mean, it's still a substantial amount of ETH. I even sold some more in the 2020 sort of bounce. I sold a bunch at like $300-400 when it came back up. Um, but thankfully, I learned from just my experience starting to meet more people and becoming a bit more financially established and well off. I have a bunch of friends who are from the finance world and talking to those guys, and I learned that um, the proper way to sort of avoid um, taxes or reduce your taxes is to just leverage collateral, low liquidity, and just borrow against your collateral for liquidity. And so learning that, I ended up not selling a lot of my ETH and just permanently holding it. And if whenever I needed it, I would borrow against it using DeFi. And that was the great thing about DeFi when exploded on the scene in 2020, is because you could collateralize your assets, your really valuable assets, the reliable assets like ETH and Bitcoin, and get liquidity out of it, and not have to pay taxes because you're not selling the ETH, right? You only pay taxes on your wins from the borrowed collateral. I mean, the borrowed
Oh
against your
yeah, yeah.
collateral. And so that was a thing for me, and just 2020 21 because of DeFi, it made things much more accessible to the general trader. It was no longer gated by centralized exchanges, right? In 2017, 2018, if a shit coin wasn't on an exchange, if you got into an ICO and that ICO didn't end up having the token go on an exchange, you were fucked. Like,
Yeah.
there's nowhere you could trade
You
besides like
couldn't
maybe Ether or Delta, which
you
there was
couldn't
no such thing as
offload it.
liquidity. Yeah,
Um
exactly.
back
You had to help.
I wanted to ask this though before we keep going. When these guys were
Yeah.
talking to you and pitching Ethereum before you bought into Ethereum in the narrative, were they mentioning Vitalik at the time by name?
Um. Uh. I don't recall. Maybe the little brother did, but that was I wasn't even paying attention. I was kind of half drunk at the time at a wedding, and so I don't remember. But the day trader dude, he did not. I don't think he did.
Okay, I'm just curious because it's a time frame that goes way back. Because right now it's a house. Vitalik's a household name, but
Yeah.
um,
Well, people knew him. People definitely knew him, especially because he became kind of known in the Bitcoin world as well, because he used to work on Bitcoin Magazine, and yeah, the ICO was definitely a big thing, and Vitalik, he became a kind of a name in crypto, and had a lot of haters, had a lot of doubters. I still remember, when I had my $7 ETH, and I was just kind of like in the chat rooms and of like Polony X Trollbox. And people were like, "Oh, ETH is vaporware. That shit's never gonna be anywhere." And the DAO happened, and it pumped to like $10, and be like, "Ha, this shit's up like 40%." And then the DAO hack happens, and ETH falls back to like $6 or something. And then everybody's like, "Told you, ETH is a scam. It's vaporware. This shit's never gonna work." And that just made me even more bullish on it, because I drank the Kool-Aid from both on the tech side from the little brother. He kind of like preached it on implications on the blockchain, actual technology side of things, and the day trader, which made a lot more sense to me, that you can just endlessly create more shit coins on it, and that is what happened, right? I think the ETH ICO was like the early big ones. Can't even remember anymore. Zcash, right? Your favorite.
Hey, bud.
That was very,
It's,
very much an
well,
early
that's all for
ICO.
tonight. We're gonna wrap it up there. No.
Yeah, yeah, that's not a personal attack, don't worry. So yeah, these ICOs, obviously got a lot of traction. Some of them got multiples of like,
Dude,
oh my God, just insane
it's
100x, 200x,
do you remember the ICOs
very
that were
quickly.
just a PDF? Like the white, they just had a white paper PDF, and that's all they needed in
Yeah, that's
2017,
all.
and people just threw money at it.
Yeah, and nobody knew really about tokenomics till way later, and but that's because everything just pumped. There was so much money coming in and very little ICOs. I mean, towards the tail end, of course, it was just insane, super bloated and saturated. But early on, there wasn't a cap. I mean, fucking EOS,
Yeah,
right? They did like $1 billion raise for like a whole year or something, and it was like it was just ridiculous. And people kept throwing money, and nobody had the understanding of like valuation, tokenomics, and that you had to like have low valuation so you have an upside and these kind of things. Things like low float and vesting. No, none of that. And those were wild times. And
very,
obviously,
very
VCs
unregulated.
came in and started to establish some sort of, I guess, guidance or rule book or playbook rather.
That's one of the very first memories I have of crypto Twitter in 2017 is remembering there were very famous Twitter accounts where their alpha was just reviewing white papers. And they would just sit there and talk about like their favorite parts of a white paper, why they
Yeah,
think it'll do well, that these other parts. They didn't care anything about the founders, nothing. Like it was just this one's written well, and they're bullish on it, and people would just FOMO
like
hit it.
Palm Beach Confidential and Ian Bellina,
Yeah,
those guys. Yeah. But good times. I mean, coming back to the or third cycle technically, but the second cycle where I finally got back into shitcoins in the 2020-21 era, that was the insane run with the mass, printing and the whole COVID craziness. And but just DeFi, it was just perfect timing because DeFi now is a thing, and having on-chain,
we assume
um,
we take it for granted now. Like
liquidity.
it's
Yeah, yeah. It was so breakthrough. Just like the Uniswap automatic market maker, liquidity provision, and the yield, incentives to drive that, and then all the other primitives that came on, like Curve for stable coin liquidity that can be interacted or intertwined into any sort of swapping platform. So there's always Curve liquidity, and then the lending from Aave and all this stuff. It was just like such an exciting moment that you start to realize that you no longer needed centralized exchanges and you could just launch these shit coins. But it was a weird time because like you had to like still build stuff, and I think we were coming off like the ICO era of having to build something, but now that it's DeFi on chain, it has to be dealing with DeFi on chain. You can't just like say I'm going to put a white paper about bicycles on the blockchain anymore, right? That shit's not going to fly. You got to have something that's more actual
correct.
DeFi mechanic related. And so you still had to kind of roll with that. But it was just interesting because then we've got the retail that explodes on later because just everything is fucking mooning. Bitcoin broke all-time high, and every time Bitcoin breaks all-time high, it drives all new money in because the disbelievers, the people that got shaken out the prior run, the ones that said, I lost money, I'm never going to get Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin again, it's never going to come back. Those are the guys that are going to come back because Bitcoin broke all-time high and they proved them wrong, and now there's no reference value where
That's when I get
they
the
can say
text
that's a
messages.
target.
That's when I get the
Yeah.
text messages. We hit all time high, and it's in unison. All these different circles they text message me as like, "Is it a good time to buy?"
Yeah,
And it's
yeah. I
like,
mean, I'm
no,
starting to get
it's
those.
a good
I'm
time to
starting to
sell.
get those.
Yeah,
Um, but they end up coming in the later stages and sending it to another leg up, right? So and what was great about 2020-21 was all these DeFi mechanics also was creating essentially leverage. And I always tell the Moonshot guys about this. Like you got to look if you want really bullish sort of environment and bullish coins. You want to see what can get people leveraged without realizing that they're in leverage. And in those days, those lending protocols like Aave and stuff were essentially leverage because you were borrowing against it. It was not very high leverage, 0.7x, or if you want to call it that, because you can borrow about 70% of what you put in, right? And for a lot of these protocols, but you would be able to then put that into another yield protocol and leverage that, basically borrow against that. And you just repeat that like a couple times, and then your 0.7x leverage ends up becoming like 4 or 5x leverage because it's just in all these protocols, layers at a time. And and I'm seeing this unfold, and I was like, oh man, I got to be ready to like pull and cash out my money and not be a sucker like last time. I just got to be on my toes. And I established this rule, and I said, look, I am never going to be able to time the top, and I'm just going to say if I make less than or I go below 50% of my all-time high paper profits, then I'm going to cash out and never put a single dollar back in. Maybe I'll leave like 5% or something just to play with. And I stuck to that rule, which saved my ass because I knew that when the dominoes starts coming down, it would be just a huge unwinding of leverage, and liquidations across the board, and just huge red candles. And that's essentially what happened when the straw that broke the camel's back was the Do Kwon Luna Terra sort of debacle, and caused that chain reaction.
Yeah,
So
people have
um,
no idea how easy that is to say what you just said, but to actually pull the trigger on a 50% down draw and call it a day, like and I
yeah,
get it. I agree with the rule, but like it's gut wrenching to watch a P&L chart where I was up 1 million and I sold at 500, but
yeah.
it saves your
Well,
butt. Like you didn't take the
it does.
99% down draw because that's what I always tell people. Like if you can survive the cycles, you're like you will eventually make it. It may suck, you may make it in two, but like typically by the third, you know how to make a bag and then also protect it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I had to go and experience 2017 to really be able to have that rule and be disciplined to follow it. I mean, I still
Thank you for
question
the
myself
ice
so
cream.
many times,
Gang,
but every
gang,
time,
gang.
when the
Slay.
markets look shaky, I reminded myself, look, I'm going to keep buying the dip until it's the last dip. Because you never know when the last dip is, right? So when it's a trending bull market, it's going to always have pullbacks. You want to find some high time frame support, moving average type sort of levels that you want to refer to, and and buy those dips until you get the last dip, because you're going to have like 20 temporary dips and only one death blow dip, right? So are you going to sit on the sidelines for that one death blow dip? So with that mentality, I realized that because you can never guess when that death blow dip is, but being able to buy every single dip, and sort of average up in these bull runs, and you're probably going to be trading in and out a bunch of shit coins anyway, but in essence, being taking advantage of those opportunities and slowly leveraging a little bit, allows you to capture more value, so that when you have that 50% haircut when you're out, it's actually you're still up than if you had just like try to trade randomly, right? So the dips help me kind of provide some guidance, because there's every market zigzags. Candles don't just go up endlessly. So the zigzags are what really um, trick people. It's really hard. It's really easy to shake people out.
Yeah,
I mean, even I got shaken out a whole bunch of my stack. I mean, I never all out and all in anymore, but I did sell a big chunk of profits, just a week or two ago, on that Bitcoin dip. But it takes a lot of, I guess, mental practice to be able to not fully be shaken out, and also to be willing to buy dips, and as well as to then take that final haircut. And you don't learn that until you go through a phase like my 2017, where I made it to 1 million and then held it all the way down, right? Made it to
no, absolutely,
more than 1 million, almost 2 million.
you,
Um, and
you,
so I held it to just a fraction of that, because the market went, negative 80 something percent, negative 90%. A lot of these shit coins went negative 99. And then once it goes down negative 99, it goes another negative 99. And so when you go through that experience, you realize it's way better to walk away with half your money out of the casino than to walk away with just 10% of it. So
Absolutely.
it's definitely experience thing, and even though I'm telling you guys this, you don't really feel it until you actually go through it. Like you can't really truly empathize and understand and be mentally disciplined until you go through it. And I always tell these guys that come in the crypto space, you're going to have to go through a bear market. You cannot win in this game without going through a bear market. You're not going to win overnight. Even if you make that crazy 50x leverage and you got lucky and suddenly overnight you make $1 million, you're going to lose it. You're going to lose it because when you make it that fast, you're going to want more when the bull market still goes, and you're going to keep going and going until that death blow comes, and then you don't know what to do with it. You have no plan, and you're going to bag hold it down negative 90%.
And
So you have to experience the process.
I completely agree with that. And you just walked into something that I forgot to even um, bring up. Uh, there's only three people I've run into in trading period that trade Deathwicks and recognize them as something different. And I remember way back in the day, I shot you a DM and I was like, "Why are you saying Deathwick?" Because I didn't know what to call these, and I just made up a term for them. And you were calling them Deathwicks as well. And I don't know if you can see the screen, but like these right here, you were both calling them like the same thing, and I started reaching out to you because like, dude, I can't find anything about these, but you're calling them the exact same thing. And I said the only other person I've ever seen mention these as well is altcoin Sherpa, but you guys don't trade the same. So I was like, what are these? How do you study them? Blah 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 blah. Because I was like, when everyone's absolutely getting destroyed, I was only seeing Sherpa and yourself buying into these dips on spot, and that was kind of the gradings of like how Rainbow Theory started. Is I was watching these capitulation death wicks and figuring out like whales have limits. Assuming the protocol doesn't collapse like Luna, there's eventually going to be a reaction that pulls up. So I was curious if we could get the history on that one, because I remember vividly you called it a death wick, and I go, I've never mentioned that term and I've never seen it. How did he just say this?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I did call it Deathwix, but I honestly can't remember where I got that from. Maybe it was just reading it randomly in Moonshot Discord from folks. Maybe other people had the same idea and I just ran with it. I can't even remember if I made it up or it just seemed obvious or I heard it around. Um, but yeah, I mean, because I mean, it's a wick, right? It's a wick, and it's also a really bad dump. So I mean, it's like a death blow for most people because it liquidates so many people. So I think it's just maybe uh, this just automatic mind share that's what you want to call it. But yeah, I mean, it's always an opportunity to trade those. I think they're fairly easy to trade. Um, when well,
Not
let me
emotionally.
step let me walk back that. Hold on. It's hard to trade it if you're knife catching because you don't know how deep it's gonna go. But it's easy to trade when it starts forming the impulse lows or impulse highs.
Can
And
you
so
show
that's
us how you
when
look at that on your screen?
sure. Let's see. I'd have to find a Deathwick.
Let me
Um
pull. I'm gonna try to switch over and see if it works. And it looks good. Good. So you're live.
okay. All right. Um what was a bad time?
The COVID one's really good.
Whoops. Yeah, the COVID dump. I like that one.
Because I remember we used to joke in Moonshot, and they were like, "Oh, this is a good one. It shut down Binance and Coinbase. Let's go hard." Like we would judge it if it actually turned the servers off.
All right, can you see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Um, okay, so death wicks, it really depends on what time frame you're trading. But generally, when we talk about death wicks, they happen so fast and they liquidate so fast. It's probably going to happen in like an hourly, I'd say, typically. What happened to my bars? Here it is. Um, and so uh, it reset me all the way back to 2023. Jesus.
If people don't
What?
know, this is a lot of what you see is a custom tool that he makes, the multi tool.
Oh, yeah, yeah. If people are interested in that, let me know. I might open it up again for folks. I don't really. I mean, it's not a like a money maker for me. I just have it, but try to keep it kind of exclusive so it's not just free handouts. Holy crap! I'm only in 2022. Oh, okay, I should probably just jump there, replay if I can't get there quickly enough.
That's the one I remember. Is the impulse was so sharp on the hourly. I I I was sitting there trying to log into Coinbase on two different computers and wiring in every dollar I had in the bank account to just buy Bitcoin under 4K.
It was the best because I think this is it. No, that's May. It was the best because so BitMEX it was well it wasn't the best at the time because it was very emotional roller coaster. Literally the entire books of BitMEX when it hit the low of the $3,200 on BitMEX, I think there was literally like $8 million of bids left in the order books, and if those $8 million get nuked, it literally would go to zero. And BitMEX was essentially driving the market at the time. Like they were like the de facto exchange. Holy crap, this doesn't go back to 2020? All right, this is dumb. All right,
You have to do
can
the
I
replay.
jump there? How do I jump there?
There used to, I think that next to the 1 5 and all, I think you can type in the date on the bottom left.
Okay, hold on. I'm scrolling quickly now. This is working.
Isn't that the one where Arthur literally unplugged the server?
Yep.
Or that's the
And
rumor?
that's yeah, that's the rumor. But it was nonstop. There was zero bids. Everybody pulled their bids, and you just watching that shit in real time. And I was like, if you look at the hourly, this pretty much this candle here. So this is the hourly candle, and this was March 20th, 6:06 Army time, whatever time zone this is. So I mean, I remember it was pretty late for me, and I just watched the whole thing just go down like this, and then it consolidate a little bit, and then just keep going. So it was at this moment here when it was down to, well, this isn't BitMEX, this is Coinbase, but it would be lower on BitMEX. It went to like 3,200. It was basically driving the market, affecting every single exchange, and BitMEX was doing the most volume. And then the server went down. And the great thing is, when it came back up, because the server went down, people started bidding. Right, there wasn't BitMEX to influence anymore. BitMEX again was the most liquid exchange, even though they were perpetuals. It was dictating the entire direction of the market. And as soon as they pulled the plug on BitMEX, everything bounced. Everything bounced by like $1,000. I mean, you can see it here. This bounce right here, it just immediately shot up, and it just kept going. It was like $5,000. So what the opportunity was when BitMEX came back up, it was still at $3,200. Okay, so their chart had $3,200 as the price, which means um, the liquidation price was actually based on um, an average of 3 exchanges, and all the exchanges had bounced to like $4,000. So even though that rebooted at 3,200, your liquidation was much higher because it was not based on BitMEX's market traded price or the last price. It was based on the average of 3 exchanges. I think it was Kraken, um, Coinbase, and maybe Bitstamp or some other guys. I don't remember, but uh, there was this arbitrage of leverage, and basically I went 100x. And I said, let's do it because my liquidation point is so high. I just went 100x, YOLO'd. I threw in like a Bitcoin and a half or something like that. I mean, it wasn't a lot at the time. It was only like, again, it was worth $3,000, $4,000. I might have bought it for like 6,000. But I threw in like one something Bitcoin in there at 100x leverage. So basically, I had 100 something Bitcoin position, and and I didn't get liquidated because my liquidation point was so high. And then that's what happened, and it just kept pumping for like an hour, and just kept pumping and pumping, pumping, and it shot up to like $5,700, and I had to go to sleep. It was like super late for me, and by the time I woke up, I think it was like somewhere, I don't know, around here before it fell back down, and I ended up I'm making like, I don't know, 15 Bitcoin from the trade,
Oh.
and I cashed out, which I shouldn't have in hindsight, because I even told myself, I said, this is such a good entry. This is such a good entry just for clout. and just to be on the charts, maybe I shouldn't close it. And I was on the brink of not doing that and letting it run to like maybe like I don't know whenever I felt that it was gonna crash, but I was just gonna be like, okay, if it gets liquidated, it gets liquidated. I had such a good position, and I didn't. But imagine if I did that and how much clout I would have if I let it run to like whenever BitMEX got pulled because of the Arthur investigations. I think it happened in like September.
When isn't there an
And
Arthur investigation and ankle monitors?
yeah, and so I think September was when it happened, and it was like around this consolidation area. So pretty much almost back to all-time high. It was like 18K, and I could have held it there, but I didn't.
Now my question here is, you fully exited, and that's not something that I know you for. Is that because of the nature of the situation, or is that because that's 2020 version of 9K?
Um, I guess culmination of all that. It's leverage for one. I don't like holding leverage positions for a long time. It's also there's obviously funding to deal with. But also just I wasn't as disciplined early on at that time, and there was still a lot of uncertainty. But I was up so much, I was like, Jesus Christ, I'm up 15 Bitcoin, that I just had to take it. But
That's
I
good.
could have made retired level money though if I just had held it all the way, as I had thought about. I
And
think
it
I was about 50%, 50-50 about considering it. I almost pulled the trigger on it.
is at this time too. Were you still developing the bots and the multi tool, or were they already kind of established by the second cycle?
Um, yeah, I had the bot. I had the bot still, and the bot actually dodged this nuke. Um, but then I stopped developing it when we started doing this run around the 12K, 13K mark, and the bot was starting to have problems because I didn't optimize it, and so it was such a huge run that I just couldn't develop an algo. I didn't have enough time or I guess analysis to really optimize the algo for the scalp bot to work in this kind of market. It wasn't coded for that. It was more of a choppy bot to perform really well in volatility and or low time frame volatility. So I was developing until around like late 2020, and I stopped working on it.
That's cool. I say it's cool. Thank you for sharing that because that most people don't give this insight. Because I remember vividly, like reaching out to you and like Altcoin Psycho when Stacked Invest was going, and I was watching like the performance of a lot of these bots, and it was really interesting to see like some authors would tear it up in the chop, and then some authors, the bots would just tear up the up only stuff. But when the markets flipped, that's when we really started seeing like a hard time with like automated algos like adapting to the markets because this stuff was insane. Like people like to, oh yeah, the 20K run. I like the memes were even better on the 20K run in my opinion because they were posting charts that were like so vertical they were going backwards. Like we couldn't keep up with the volatility, and it was just absolutely insane.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, so you have to if you're an algo developer and just any sort of you know trader. I mean, as a trader, yes, you have to always update yourself to the market, adapt to the market, um, which is quick to do because you don't have to write code. But if you're a algo developer and actually code, then yes, it takes a lot more time, and you're gonna have to constantly update your actual formulas, or else it's not gonna perform well when the market dynamics change. And also, I want to say that you have to being light mode is pro when you're trading. Okay, dark mode. I used to do dark mode, then I realized how more effective and visually apparent things are when you're on light mode. And I also like to say that when you're trading and you're looking at charts, it's critical for you to be able to shock yourself awake when you're checking it at 3 a.m. because there might be some important information on the chart that you don't want to miss. So make sure that you get blinded sufficiently so that your ass is awake at 3 a.m. to actually trade.
I remember joking about this because I always used to give you hell for it, and then this year I bought an ultra wide, and then it like clicked in my head. I'm like, 9K is using an ultra wide and light mode, and then I just started asking you for sunscreen recommendations. I was like, this is because I've occasionally done it where the I'm in a dark room, the 49's all darked out, and it looks pretty, and then boom, and it's uncomfortable. Because yeah, glad
I
you
know what
guys
you mean.
noticed that in the chat because I that's my biggest beef with 9K at this point.
But look, I mean, I guess we kind of went off subject here because we were talking about the Death Wick and how to actually trade that. And I guess I'll circle that back real quick.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um,
Because I'm curious how you measure it. Because like this is these death wicks are really what keened me in on Rainbow Theory and like made me like develop it. And I was like, I need to be able to figure out how to measure this. So I added colors to the moves, and I was like, okay, these colors. This is these are the colors Bitcoin paints when it's
yeah,
bottomed out.
yeah. So basically, the trick is when you've got a massive percentage move very quickly. So this is an hourly, and so here we dropped from 7,400 back then to 5,500, $2,000 drop, right out of 7,500. I mean, that's more than 20% drop, I think, and that would be considered a potential death wick right here, right? And then we've got a second leg down. So knife catching is very tricky because you don't know how deep the thing's going to go until the candle closes, and even after the candle closed and you got this chop over here, some consolidation, we still lost this leg and it kept going down. But you could technically trade this block here, and you can trade this block here. Um, the question is, whether this block is signifying that this may be a continuation or whether there might be um, uh, a potential reversal happening. And you could use certain things like looking for divergences, you can look for a volume exhaustion. And so there's some clues that you can try to use to determine whether this is going to be a consolidation move. I mean, if we look at the volume at the time, I mean, this is pretty substantial volume, right? So you're
Absolutely.
probably gonna attempt to trade this. I mean, relatively speaking, I mean, this was this low and then it picks up quite big over here. So you could attempt to trade this. So let's just uh, I can't do this again, I guess. We'll just say that we can't see the rest of this leg down yet, and we're trading this. Usually what you want to do is establish the impulse high and the impulse low. I mean, I might be even looking this on the 15-minute level, but you can see there's a wick here at 6,700, and there's another wick down to 5,700, forming this hourly candle, and you can try to see if that's the range where the impulse occurs. Um, and so you can actually establish that as your potential range. So we'll use this fib retracement mark here. And so you do something like this where I usually set quartiles. Some people don't even bother with quartiles. They'll do just rather regular fib, but it's important to have the 0.5% fib level for any range you trade, because that's the equilibrium, right? So the psychological thinking is that a buyer versus seller sort of market is always about a balance, equilibrium, and which direction wins is going to be breaking that equilibrium, that balance. So the same sort of market psychology should translate on the chart. And so the thinking goes is that the 0.5% equilibrium for a range is important because this is the part where the bulls and the bears are trying to fight against each other to break out of this range. So you draw a range level like this, and you try to trade this range. Um, I don't want to zoom in again to 15 minutes because it's probably going to reset me to a different page. But basically, when you're in the range, you can trade these levels. I like to trade by quartile levels because the quartile level is another form of equilibrium, right? A lot of people use this Fibonacci golden ratio thing. I think it's a load of crap. I've used it. I played around with it before, but I think it's very voodoo. It doesn't make market psychology sense other than maybe some momentum play, but then you can just use other things like moving averages and stuff. But
Sorry, not
here,
sorry.
but here, I think it makes more psychological sense to me, market psychology sense, because again, we're talking about equilibrium, this bulls versus bears, fight. And then when
Absolutely.
you have a quartile, it's another equilibrium of the equilibrium range. So you're playing these ranges here. And you could probably even go even, you know, equilibrium of the equilibrium of the equilibrium if you really wanted to. But it gets redundant at some point because you lose effective sort of range. If you want to start getting that tight, then you would just go down a time frame. But in this case, you can see that 0.5% or zero point 0.5, the 50% equilibrium, served as a resistance this entire time, and the market trend, the macro trend was bearish. I mean, if we look at the moving average, it's probably going to be under. So here's the moving average. These are all various time frames of the exponential moving average, and it's moving under the moving average the entire time. So you should have already a bear bias, and when you're seeing rejections on the zero point 0.5, you might assume that we're probably going to leg down again, especially when you've got declining volume and this anticipation of maybe we're going to break out, and then you've got these attempts, these false breaks, and it doesn't quite break yet, and then you get this big one. But when you're starting to see all these kind of things, you might be able to think that the range is, at least on this scale, is probably not a good one to trade. So
No,
going back to this
this is
death wick
key.
thing,
Key, yeah, because
yeah,
let me because this is if you hide the rest of the chart and like you're looking at this live, that first big candle like wakes me up and I start watching it like a hawk. And then my mind goes, is it a flash wick? Is it a V bottom? Or is this preliminary support before like a full blown death wick? And that's kind of like how you're looking at it with quartile exhaustion.
yeah, basically. I mean, I'm trying to consider now, you could probably make trades in here, right? You're trading, okay, so when it gets to zero point 0.5, you might put a short in here. And it's probably better to short right now than to long, unless you're getting the bottom range here. So when you're hitting this resistance of the equilibrium, you're going to assume that bears are probably going to win because you've got this macro bias that you're already in a downtrend. So you place shorts to be in confluence with the greater trend. And so you place shorts at the zero point 0.5, and you'd probably place closes at the 0.75 or at the bottom of the range. You can take partials, 33% here, partial profit, 3% at the bottom range, and then let it run for another 30% if we do a breakout. And then you would probably take some stops above the zero point 0.5, which if you were trading, if you were trading at the shorter time frame, we have a wick here, a small wick above this, so you might have got shaken out. Who knows? I mean, what you were trading at the time. But the point is, you want to try to identify. You can take some low time frame, trades here, but you want to try to identify whether this is a continuation, potential continuation, or reversal. And just even looking at candle patterns, this isn't very. I mean, if let's say you don't even see this candle here, this big red one that poked out of the range, but if you were kind of in here, um, you want to see strength breaking up to zero point 0.5, and if you don't see that strength, and especially on a lower time frame, volume going up to follow through, it could be um, a clue that it's a continuation pattern.
Can
So
I
yeah,
get you to because a lot of the people that don't know you like the OGs do. Can you explain what that tool was? And I know the answer, but the GMMAs, because you're one of the few that use this thing, but it's I've seen you use
oh
it for a very long time and do very very well.
yes, I think it's one of the best tools for moving averages. So the GMMA is stands for the Guppy moving multiple or Guppy multiple moving average. Um, Honestly, I don't know why it's called Guppy now that I think of it. Maybe the guy who wrote it likes guppies. Who knows? But anyway, it is a pretty good for telling you at a glance where multiple possible trends traders are, because these red lines and the blue lines, they represent different exponential moving average time frames. Um, if we let's look at the specifics here. So, you got 3, 5, 8, 10, 12, 15 for the fast moving average, which is the blue lines here. And then we've got 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, and 60 EMA periods for the red lines over here. And so what this tells you is you've got the blue lines are short-term traders because you're trading on a shorter period of time, and then you got the longer time frame traders that's represented by the red ones, and those are the long-term. That's the long-term trend, that the higher time frame trend. And so why it's important to have these two distinguished is because you can see where confluence arrives and how much divergence there is between short-term traders and long-term traders. when the short-term traders are below the long-term traders, it's a bearish move because obviously right now we're trading under the historic price, and we're trading under the historic price. That's when it diverges below. And then if you have it on top, that's when you're trading above the historic price, like this, right? When it's strongly trending, you'll have these bounces a couple times. Every time it pulls back and there's confluence between the short term and the long term traders, that is the place where there's perceived optimal value, right? So if you think about a moving average, why do moving averages work so well? Because it is the price point in which the best optimal value is perceived. If you're buying something above the moving average, you might be paying something overpriced, right? If you're buying below the moving average, you might be in a downtrend. So where's the best place where the best price you get, the market, true market value that's perceived is exactly at the moving average. But in reality, nothing works that way. So a single moving average might not have enough confluence. And that's why you use something like a multiple moving average, and you can see where confluence occurs through the differences between the short-term trend and the long-term trend all at a glance. And so that's why I like to use the Guppy, the GMMA, because it gives you very notable sort of uptrends. I mean, let's just go to ETH, for example. Is this in replay mode still? Is this our current price? This is our current price. Good.
Yeah, we should be good.
So let's see the daily trend. I mean, look at this. The trend that ran from October to now, we had this, there's no pullback all the way touching the blue and the red, and that means it is a very strong trend when it's diverged like that. Just know that the stronger that you diverge, though, the more quickly it could pull back. But here at this point, this is a pullback right here, and this is a pullback right here when there's convergence. And when there's this convergence here, these are points of optimal entry. And if it goes definitively below, the blue line starts diverging below, that's when we probably lost the trend. And so this is the daily trend, by the way. So you're looking at this on a higher time frame. But if we go into the 4-hour, we're probably going to see even more bounces. Well, this is a very strong move. So we saw one bounce here and some consolidation here. We, came back. Anyway, so
I like it because I like your. I've always liked this one. I don't personally use it, but I watch you use it a lot because you and Altcoin Psycho are the only two I've seen use it, and Altcoin Psycho uses it for macro bottoms. And he's like, is it flipped yet on I think the daily or the 3 day is what he uses. The Super Guppy, which is basically the same thing. Because I like how you use this, especially when you're drawing the Ichimoku clouds. Because at that point, I just have to pay attention because I can't mentally comprehend Ichimoku with GMMAs without paying.
Ichimoku's great. It's also I love signals that give me stuff at a glance. By the way, I think clicking out of that replay on the ETH chart had also clicked me out on the stupid Bitcoin chart. So I'm not going to waste time trying to scroll all the way back.
That's fine.
But I think showing you that leg, that incomplete leg, that mid leg on that March 12th dump, 2020 dump, kind of gives you an idea. You want to establish a range. You can customize your fibs to establish just 0.5 or equilibrium type of ranges for your lines. And I think it's a great tool when you're range trading, and not necessarily just for death wicks. Death wicks are great because you can have a window of opportunity to make some really big trades, because oftentimes after a death wick, it's almost guaranteed to have consolidation. And so and that means there's going to be range trade. There's a lot of hesitation. There's going to be a lot of back and forth from the bulls and the bears, and it's oftentimes that first candle after the death wick forms the low and the high, and when it forms the low and the high, it gives you a range to work with right away, and that becomes a historic reference point for most traders, for most of the market, because now you can look back and be like, okay, well, that appears to be the range that we'll trade in.
That's
and
one
so,
of the, I was gonna say that's one of the greatest like alpha tricks that people don't pay attention to, because I've always tried to teach people about death wicks. I was like, if you give me a confirmed death wick with the colors I want, we're going into a 2-month accumulation, and most people are completely wiped out and not level-headed enough to trade it, because it's cheat mode. It's say, hey, everyone just got blown out, there's your death wick, it's time to now kind of walk through a Wyckoff accumulation schematic. It's not going to be perfect, but like what you said, it's accumulation time.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, so that's that on Death Wicks, but GMMA's excellent tool for when you're trading the trend. Um, I also like to use levels, daily, weekly, monthly levels, which is what these horizontal lines are, because they also act as very high time frame historical reference points. Um, the
Do you,
red here is a monthly, and the orange here is a weekly. So if I, zoom out to the week, and you can actually see, well, let's turn off the guppy here.
and you
So the
hand draw
orange
these?
line, yeah, these are all hand drawn. Um, and so when you draw it in advance on a large scale and then you're in the middle of the trade, it reminds you where these key levels are. And so you're kind of zoomed in on the daily or the 4 hour when you're trading. And so making sure that you've pre-drawn these lines gives you some reference points, because this orange line here was drawn way long ago. This red line here was drawn way long ago. So when I'm trading and we're approaching the red line, you can see that there's action happening at these levels. It's almost kind of eerie where you get the continuation candle between these levels, and this just has this up grind, and then facing some resistance on this monthly, and then it breaks out and kind of chops around between the green and the orange. Well, the green is newly drawn. That's a new level that we reached, and I just marked it green because it's the most recent one. I don't want to mix it up with these historical levels. So the historical levels are important because, again, when you're trading in a smaller time frame, it reminds you where there could be potential action happening. And you got to remember that confluence is just like sort of the idea of narrative and mind share. Confluence is just the technical analysis way of saying mind share and narrative. And so uh, the place that the most expected confluence slash mindshare occurs are usually going to have the most reaction, whether it's a bounce or whether it's resistance. And you're going to have oftentimes consolidation around those levels, or you're going to have extreme reaction around those levels. And so when you're looking at the weekly and the monthly, you got to remember that these levels or these time frames include all the smaller time frames and candles below it, right? So the weekly includes the daily traders, includes the 4 hour traders, includes the 1 hour trade. They're all happening at that area. So it creates confluence. And so it's important to pre-draw these levels because that's where a lot of traders remember historically and refer to it historically to actually make decisions. Um,
This is
so
awesome because you were this this interview's jogging old memories that I've forgotten. And I remember specifically when I was going through crypto Twitter and all the different discords, and I was trying to backwards engineer like what these traders were saying to try to figure out who's real alpha, who's just LARPing. And I remember vividly, like I didn't really know you that much at the time, but you would occasionally answer a DM if I was shooting you a question or something. And I remember you called a B cash top, and I you just called it to a T within like 10 or 20 cents, and I go, how the hell did he see that? Because there was nothing there like on the chart, like I could see resistance, and I messaged you, and you were like, oh, it was the blah 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 pivot of a something on a monthly or something. You said something to that effect. I don't remember it exactly. So I went back
Thank you
with
for the ice cream.
to
Gang,
the
gang, gang.
sorry.
Slay.
Thank you for the follow. I remember going back in the charts and I'm looking exactly for what you said and I couldn't find it. And I finally went back like 2 or 3 years in the Bitcoin Bcash data and I found what I thought was the pivot you were referring to. And I remember I DM'd back to you because I didn't want to just say, I was like, you just told me the answer. I'm not going to just go back to 9K and be rude and say, I don't see it. Show me, asshole. Feed it to me. I was like, man, I went back and I found it. But I was like, are you really referring to the pivot from 3 years ago? And you go, yeah. And it was just like, my mind blew because then I realized like this confluence of where like the mind share is to me, I didn't think a whale would care about price from 12 months ago or 2 years ago, but they do, and the bots react on it as well. And that was that's a memory I haven't thought about in a long time. You just woke back up, so thank you for that one because that was cool, and thank you for answering a DM randomly like that back in like 2019 or 18.
wow, that's a long time ago. I
Yeah,
probably wasn't even as a good trader back then. Um, but I've been constantly learning, right? learning from others and learning from our own mistakes. But yeah,
Absolutely.
the level's definitely important because you don't have
Thank you for the
reference.
ice
Like,
cream.
look at this
Gang,
chart
gang,
right now.
gang.
Like, this is the weekly chart of
Slay.
Bitcoin, and we're moving along up. And this is currently February 2024 we're in. But where is the reference on these charts? Like, where do you actually, as we go into low time frame price discovery, so recent price discovery, right, of this year or within the last 2 years, but there's nothing to refer to. So you have to go back to the last place that is possible to have an actual reference value, and that's not all the way until December of 2021 now. And we're kind of in this. I can't really call this, I mean, a level here. It's very weak level because there's only 2 touch points. It could be significant on a low time frame, and we're kind of at this level right now, this mark here. So you could maybe consider this to be level. It's never going to be perfect, by the way. I mean, it could be maybe here, it could be maybe here, but it gives you a rough idea where this is. But I see this as a weak level because there isn't a very strong reaction, at least this week on this weekly. It might close maybe here. If it does, then it's more telling that this is actually going to matter, this level. But right now, we're kind of the body of it is poked above the body of this and poked above all these wicks. So this could be a very weak level. There's only 2 touch points here. But I think it's going to be this 58 area that's going to be a lot more testy. This has a couple more touch points, and there's just a lot more action in the zigzag area here, and a little bit over here as well. That's the breaker candle before it goes in another leg down. So I think 58K, we're going to see some interesting reaction. And we haven't really had a genuine pullback for a long time. This weekly was really good though because it was a very bullish wick, and it kind of tells us that buyers have still a lot more interest. You never know. Strong bull runs. I mean, look at this. Remember back in 2020, 21. I mean, you think if you just replay this, and you're like, holy shit, look at the size of this monster, and we broke out with barely a peak at the 20K previous all-time resistance, and we just smashed this. And if you're a rational person, you'd say, man, this could be the top because of how little pullback we had, and this almost looks like a topping candle. I mean, this is a long spinning top, but you got the 2 long wicks at the bottom and the top. You could be like, oh, that's the top. But nope, that's not the top. I mean, what happens right after? We keep going insanely, right? So who knows? Who knows? You never know. But it is good to play level by level, both on the short time frame and the high time frames. It's good to have a picture of everything from the bigger trend as well as the time frame you prefer trading. So
No,
so
absolutely.
I do want to also touch base on that time frame because people ask like, well, what time frame should I be trading on? What's the best time frame? What's the most informative time frame? People ask that oftentimes, especially newer traders. They don't know what time frame works because they get conflicting info. Oftentimes, if you use all these different, TA indicators, you're going to get conflicting information from different time frames. So my answer to you is always trade the time frame that works best for you, the one that you can pay attention to and not be emotionally stressed about, the one that makes most sense, that works for you. So that's the answer about time frames.
I appreciate that. I remember that's where I initially was drawn to the H1. And then as I matured, I started switching over to the H4 because I couldn't glue myself to the charts full time. And that's what helped me out. Because people ask me the same thing. Like, why aren't you looking at the 5-minute candles? I was like, I don't really care if I'm not trying to grab 2% on something this volatile.
Yeah.
Another question I want to back up to on the Ichimoku stuff, since we've already crushed the fib traders, which Ichimoku settings are best?
Default.
Absolutely. I don't care
Always default.
what Josh says. I kid.
No, I get it. I get the other crypto time frame. It makes sense. It makes sense in a I guess, development context because of the way the Ichimoku was designed was intended for a Japanese uh, financial markets trading schedule, and crypto is obviously 24/7. So there's some time frame adjustments made for the crypto settings. But the way I don't see that being actually sufficient as a answer or to convince me to make that adjustment is because it all comes back down to confluence. If every trader was trading on the Ichimoku crypto settings, then yes, that's going to be the superior settings because you get the trader confluence. But you're going to be at a lack of an edge. You won't have an edge you might think it's different, you might have an edge, but it's not true in my opinion because you're going to be out of sync with the rest of the market, where everybody else who are Ichimoku traders, they will have confluence on the actual default settings. That's the one. Even Wall Street trading, is doesn't change. Most of these Wall Street traders, day traders on the Ichimoku or whatever traders on the Ichimoku, these TA traders, and trading stocks, they're going to be trading on the default settings. That's just the belief is that it's a well-oiled engine. It is the default settings were designed, yes, as original reference value, a reference point for Japanese markets, the schedule, but at the end of the day, it's the mechanics that move with each other that makes it just perfectly in sync. That it just got figured out, and I think we just roll with it because it has the most confluence. That's my take on the Ichimoku default settings.
Thank you for that, because that's one of the most of the Ichi guys I follow do the double, and I tend to prefer that as well. But I've seen, for years you use the the standard ones, and it works both ways. But no, I appreciate that. Um,
Yeah, I love Ichimoku. It's one of the best TA inventions because you get just again Ichimoku literally means at a glance in Japanese, and it is at a glance. I can see so many time frames and so much information from just all this.
I did not know that. That's cool. And back to your point on the levels, because we kind of walked into the third cycle already here. Um, Price action wise, we're way higher than I thought we were going to be at this point before the halvening, and it's getting into the weird spot because we're not slowing down, price isn't pulling back, and ETFs keep consuming, and Barry's not putting a dent in it. And I'm just like, man, most of the time we don't want to entertain talking about all-time highs before the halvening, but like we're running out of altitude. Um, Before that kind of becomes a reality. So people are talking like death wicks that they're getting scared of like a potential death wick. But the one thing I will say about death wicks is like you cannot predict them. Like there's no, they're impossible to call in my opinion when they start. Now once they're live, you can trade them, but like trying to predict it's a whole other thing. And
Yeah,
now we're
for
on
sure.
the Say token, which I
It's insane. It's a dollar. It touched what, $1.04, $1.04, almost $1.05. Jesus.
I apologize to the stream. We were going to pump this after the stream when we moved back to the Discord. So my apologies. The time schedules got mixed up. But no, this has been one of the craziest things I've seen and traded in a long time, because this is like reminds me back of like 2017 levels, and this is like one of the big things that like I tore up in Q4, and people keep asking me, "Oh, thank you so much for pointing out Say. I'd never heard about it to you." And I keep telling the people like I didn't know about Say. I just know one of my most trusted guys in like the circle that I trust was talking about it, and I remember you talking about it, and I was like, I haven't heard 9K talk about something in this tone in a while, because you're Moonshot in general, and like your group, your guys are always getting into stuff. Half the stuff I don't even know how to purchase, and then this one came up, and the tone was very, very different. So I know I've heard you tell the story on a Twitter space, but I was wondering if you could walk us through how you guys kind of came into this one, because this one's evolved into a side project that we'll touch on next.
Yeah. I mean, definitely was sitting through the bear market for quite a while, as with everyone else, and And when I realized that the ETF thing that's that's the trade. I mean, I made a little bit of money in the beginning of 2023. I think coming out of the 20K break, and there was a nice bounce on the equities market on everything in 2020, or in like the January period of 2023. And then I sold in like May. I believed in the sell in May, walk away thing. And then I learned about the Bitcoin ETF, and I was very hesitant about it. I wanted to make sure it was real. And then once we broke out of the 30K range, that was it. I was like, okay, we're going for this. And I started preparing all my money, all the fiat, all the stable coins I have. I was getting it ready. It's like this might be like the rally. And I didn't know what to buy. I was out of the game for a while because I was just like trading random meme coins for a while, um, and it was like chucking $1,000 here or there. It was not very big swings until this ETF thing, and I realized, okay, if this is legitimate, and even if it's not, it's enough of a narrative to get people involved, and it's probably going to bring speculation on the shit coins. And I want to be making sure I got exposure, and so I started getting back into the crypto, like the more popular like centralized exchange coins. And I didn't know where to start, so I just said, let's just bet on stuff I'm familiar with, and I started buying all this Uni and Curve, and I mean you can probably still see it on my chart here. I mean my list, excuse me, my list here, Litecoin, EOS, even. And I was like, I don't know what to do, so I just bought this stuff based on what I thought the chart looked good, and I got my feet wet, and I said, okay, now I gotta like find like an edge, like actually new shit, shit that doesn't have bag holders from the prior cycle, stuff that was raised in the bear and is going live for the first time. And so I started assembling a list, and CryptoRank.io. That's the site I came across because I was trying to find investing information, tokenomics information. Highly recommend that site, CryptoRank.io. And I use that to have a quick at a glance of like the funds that back the various projects. Started like sifting through the most recent like big funded coins by Coinbase Ventures or Multicoin, any sort of big VCs, and then checking when their lock schedule is, then looking through their narrative, and really narrowing it down to just a handful. And that ended up being like Celestia, Sui, Say, um, and then a bunch of random shit like Maverick and Next. And that was all occurring between late October and November. Did a lot of hunting through a bunch of all these theses to Moonshot Discord. Shout out to the Moonshot fam, and that's one of the important things, to make sure you've got an alpha group with you, that some pretty good guys that are gonna actually help crowdsource and do some due diligence for you. So definitely help in that regard to further vet some of these thesis coins. And
We can go ahead and say
yeah,
his name. Shout out to Malvin for going
yeah.
like
Shout out to Malvin's.
full on. He went from the news guy to because he always had the latest and greatest happening news now, to just full on, uh, damn near a private detective, like on some of these coins and what they were doing, and it was
Yeah,
like cool to see that evolve.
which is, I mean, that is exactly what being in a closed circle, a tight knit group is all about. And so yeah, shout out to Malvin's. And I hope for other users seeing like this crowdsourced like research going on like in real time, and just talking between each
Thank
other
you for the
on
ice
these
cream.
channels.
Gang,
I
gang,
mean, that
gang.
should be one of the best sort of learning methods for people in the space, where they are seeing how the logic and the research is happening. So ended up with these handful of coins, and so I started trying to check my network and vet these coins. And I had one guy that I was following me on Twitter, and we had a mutual contacts. I've never spoke with them, but we had mutual contacts. But he was an angel investor in Say token, so I just DM'd him. I was like, in crypto language, I was like, "Good coin, sir," and I didn't expect him to respond, but he did. He responded 2 days later, and he gave me a big shill of why he bought the Say token, or why he invested in the Say. And it just made sense, and it basically validated to me that this was a good investment. And I think he included some subtle alpha in there, which helped kind of swing it in the decision into actually buying a whole big bag of Say. And yeah, I mean, I didn't expect it to go to a dollar immediately, but I figured, if Ethereum Classic could be the value of like equivalent value would be like $1.30 for market cap per se, then we can certainly get to a dollar at some point. But then at the time I was looking at the chart and I think it was like down here, it was like right before this pump here. I think this pump was from the Circle USDC announcement. I think it was right the day before. That's when I bought and shilled it to Moonshot. And I was like, I'm buying this thing. And I figured, there's also a lot of FUD on it. The fact that it's a tier one back coin by like Jump, who makes big market making volume, GSR, and then you had like Coinbase Ventures, and it was featured on Binance Labs or something at some point, and so it had a lot of big players behind it. But then it was fudded like crazy about like the shitty airdrop that they did, and everybody sold their airdrops and dumped it all the way down. And I was like, well, this looks great, And when you have that much FUD, but that much tier one backing, and the vesting schedule is still locked till like mid late next year, then I was like, this is probably a window of opportunity because we get this uptrend. It's starting to form this cup, right? And I was like, yeah, let's buy some. And I get this, um, affirmation from this contact, and I just said, I'm gonna make this probably 50% of my bag at the time. I mean, ended up being way bigger now because it just exploded in value. But at the time, I was like, I'm gonna go and keep buying and buying, buying until I make 50% of my portfolio, say. And here we are. It worked out. It was a very, very good gamble, but it was an educated gamble. And that's the things you got to do, man. You got to do your own research. Like literally, I was doing my own research and then vetting it by crowdsourcing stuff, and also vetting it by asking people in your network to affirm, if you can get a little bit of edge on why it's worthwhile to hold these coins, instead of just, listening to some random, um, CT influencer.
Oh, I've lost so
So
much money doing that, thinking, oh, he's got a hundred
everybody has.
thousand, and then you're like, oh no, he's a sellout, and a bribe, and then no, absolutely. Thank you for doing that because this is like kind of trying to tell this. I've been trying to tell the story of these people, like in the Rainbow group. Like you've got to do your research. You've got to cut your own teeth, find out what works for you, and then like learn how to listen to like your OGs. Because this is the one where I was like, he's talking about this in a way I've never seen him talk. And then I start picking up that like altcoin Sherpa's talking about it. I'm like, that's a separate circle, and he's talking about say similar to 9K, and I was like, I know they know each other, but they're not like talking daily, or maybe you are, but it doesn't come off that way. So then I start like reaching out to my like tertiary one, which is Jared Gray with Sushi Swap, and frankly, I can't understand what he says, even though it's in English. But I gauge the tone, and I have to like he starts going off on these protocols that's 10 levels above my head, and I'm like, okay, Jared's super excited about this. I don't know what he's saying, but like it sounds really cool. Whatever this EVM upgrade is, and it fixes all these things. I was like, okay, if I got the trifecta of these dudes talking about this, I'm gonna go hard on it. And then I started trading it around that time. What you were talking about, like the 15 cents, and it's just been like the rainbow theory stuff. The way I use it, this thing just paints repeatedly, like over and over the same setups, and the whoever's providing liquidity to it, they keep picking it up off the floor, and it's just
Yeah.
sustained so many pullbacks, and it's got cool tech behind like it's I remember I told a coworker about it, and he started using it for like payments, and he's like, hey man, did you ever like look into how fast say is? And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, we aren't waiting for transfers. He goes, if you click it, it's already there. He's like, there's no, he's like, it's like beyond instant. And I was like, yeah, it's cool. Like it's not just like it's got great memes for sure, but it's got really 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 good tech too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I forgot to mention that's one of the other pieces. What sold me on getting into Say is because it was positioned or sold as um, a chain that's capable of on-chain trading, and we're talking about like the DYDX is perpetual type trading, which is very high volume action. You need to have very fast settlement to make sure that trade goes in on time and can actually also handle essentially market maker algos that aren't going to get rate limited essentially by these TPSs from these slow chains. And so we're talking about this is early November of last year where people are still kind of iffy on altcoins at the time, and people were very much still kind of in bear market mindset. And so I didn't want to take too big of a risk. So I needed a narrative on these coins that I was picking that just would make safer sense with a lot of upside. And so Say was top of the list because it was positioned as a trading chain. And my thinking is that if anything has any value at all in crypto, whatever services, whatever narrative, or whatever thing you're going to put a blockchain or something on the blockchain with, the thing that's going to be always consistent and sticking around is trading itself. Crypto is always going to be traded. So when you bet on trading tools, you're basically buying, the picks and the shovels. And the best thing about Say is that you always have that to fall back on. Yeah, you're going to build other stuff on it. You can build a whole bunch of stuff on it, but the way that it's sold as and how it raised the money and establishing the capabilities for trading high volume and very quickly um, is a very compelling reason to hold Say because it has that capability while also allowing for its ultra fast TPSs for everything else as well. So it's a very multifaceted project that allows a lot of builders to build on while still having that fallback narrative.
Because I remember this is the only other token I've heard of spoken in that way that could handle the throughput of technically like exchange transactions. Because I
Mm-hmm.
remember before the FTX debacle, I remember reading specifically SBF's write ups on why he went so hard on Solana. Because at the
Mm-hmm.
time, that was one of the only ones that even had like a chance. Like if you actually wanted to like imagine doing like the number of Binance transactions in a day on chain, like Litecoin's not going to do it, right? And seeing this one kind of spawn too, and then get the backing to it because it makes sense, like what you said. But it's cool to see like everyone talks about this chain's fast, this chain's fast, blah blah blah, and then this one's like flat out like it technically can do it,
Yep.
which is just
Yeah.
insane.
And the crazy thing about Say is that when it has EVM compatibility, it's going to be bringing so much users and existing projects, battle tested projects onto the chain because there's also a huge war chest that's waiting to really incentivize it. Liquidity incentives always drives traffic, but it's I think it's executed very well in terms of its own narrative as well as just the folks behind the Say team. They know how to pace things, and so I see people coming onto the chain to build through incentives, but then also sticking around and not just leaving when the incentives dry up because it has sufficient narrative and a sufficient tech in terms of the TPS. And we've seen, how attractive that is as a with Solana now as an alternative solution to Ethereum. And people got used to the fast chain sort of interaction. And so Say has that compelling sort of Solana narrative as well. But then you marry that into EVM. Holy man, it's gonna be it's gonna be not just an ordinary L2 or not going to be like a polygon or whatever, because of the very fact that it tracks also dual type of developers with Rust, right? So Solana is also Rust based, and CosmWasm is also Rust based. So it has familiarity, and therefore it increases the development audience. Now, you tack on other projects like there's Neon virtual machine. They are building a Solana VM as well on Say. So you're gonna have Say with CosmWasm, which is the Cosmos language. You're gonna have EVM, and you're gonna have Solana support, basically allowing you to fork any Solana contracts over, all on the single chain, and that's gonna be extremely bullish. That is going to be a narrative that I think will send Say into well, maybe the Koreans are right. Maybe it will go to $10. I wouldn't discount it in like peak bull run.
Yeah, it's that's awesome, and thank you for that. And I agree too. It's this is one of those ones where I have to keep reassessing. Like the team hasn't dropped it. They haven't just like done an upgrade and then pieced out to the wind like we've seen so many projects. This team is like working on holidays, delivering, and then they keep adding stuff that I frankly have no idea what they're even talking about, but it sounds awesome. Um, and
Yeah,
I
I
just
mean
kind
it's
of go off
doing
tone.
extremely well without even the liquidity incentives, which is insane. It's pricing and expectations, but the fact that you're also seeing people calling it a ghost chain, there's no TVL, just tells me that okay, well these disbelievers means it's still far from the top. There's room to go. Just like the same way where I had the thesis of all these airdrop sellers, people are saying, oh look, this is a shit chain and everybody's selling their airdrops. Well, to me, that was a information asymmetry because I had all the bullish reason to enter, which was excellent. So that means that to me, this kind of translates the same way that people who are still fudding say as a ghost chain means that there's still entry opportunities. Now, I did take a lot of profits around this dip here, um, which, obviously in hindsight, I could have made off of with a lot more. But you never know. I mean, this could have been a continuation dump if everything really fell through. If nothing ever really came back for a while, if Bitcoin tested 30K, low 30s, then this would probably see much lower, maybe 38 cent or 32 cent, levels. So I had to lock in some profits. I mean, I was in from 12, 13 cents. So, you know, I think it made pretty reasonable sense to take profits around this 75 to 65 level. But I also learned the lesson to never go all out and never to go all in. So I'm still riding my position. I think I got about half my say position still left, a little less than half, which is pretty substantial still. But now I got these stable coins from taking profits that I can wait on the sidelines now and just other opportunities. I mean, these aren't going to be the final coins. I mean, these are, yeah, the coins I started with and significantly increased my purchasing power. So even if I sell some and I'm missing out on this ride, I won't be as emotional or FOMO driven or panic driven because I know for a fact if the bull market keeps going, especially Bitcoin breaks all time high, there's gonna be new coins that arrive, and when those new coins arrive, I don't need to sell other positions. I got stable coins already, so there's a temporary lull where I might not be maximizing profits for the next 2 or 3 weeks, maybe even the next 2 or 3 months, but I'm feeling very comfortable where I got exposure to the run still with my existing bags, but I also now got powder, right? The worst is when there's an opportunity that arrives and then you're forced to sell and make a decision on which positions you have to sell. And oftentimes you're going to choose the ones that you think are the weakest and you sell at the least optimal price points and it just bounces and keeps going up. So I think not trying to chase or time things and just having a plan and just taking partial profits, having partial exposure is always the best way. It's definitely a mindset game. Going back to what we started with, the third cycle, the third shitcoin cycle, is probably going to be the cycle where you really make it. I mean, this is my third shitcoin cycle that I'm going to go into. I think this is the one where I'm going to retire, and be done with it all. Um, well, maybe I'll still be involved just for degeneracy, but probably not going to be trading hardcore as much anymore. But
We'll
that is
still
because
at
the
you.
first cycle is when you lose all it, when you round trip it, and the second cycle is when you learn to keep some, and the third cycle is now when you are patient enough that you're okay with missing out. And when you miss out, you don't really miss out because if it's the full blown market, there's going to be new coins that you have prime entries for from the bottom. So so yeah, I mean, one coin I'm actually got my eyes on right now is Starknet. It's majorly flooded right now, and I know there's a very short vesting cycle. I mean, and those guys have been raising a massive valuation ever since 2018 or 2019. And so there's a lot of FUD going around that. But I think there could be a window of opportunity. I mean, it doesn't hurt. I mean, there might be an initial dump, and if there is, I think it doesn't hurt to buy a small bag and see what happens.
Yeah,
Um,
and that's
yeah.
that. This is walking into something that this is something I found really unique that made me like start to realize like the moonshot mentality on a lot of this stuff is like cumulative lesson learned, and it's a lot of stuff. It's the way you talk about it. It's to you it's normal, but I think a lot of people don't comprehend um, this level of I would call it discipline. I naturally want to always be long and not have powder, and you are constantly skimming off the top and you're updating. Hey guys, I took another 10%. I've got 30% of this position left. Da 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 da. And you covered that brilliantly just now, but I wanted to back up to that, and if you could go into some of the lessons of kind of like the moonshot guys and yourself about how you never ever fully exit a shit coin, and try to keep a bag, because there's been so many people that have coulda, woulda, shouldas, and if they had just kept a little bit and held on to it, and then that ends up becoming the rock star. If you could go through, if I could walk you into that common lesson, sell half on a double and bag it, I'd love to get that out of you.
Yeah, it's hard though. It's definitely, even I'm still guilty of selling everything. I mean, there's a couple of big wins that I could have had if I didn't just sell everything. But you can't win it all. You never know. I think it's important to establish what I call the anchor bags, right? So you've got your thesis that you go in early and you go heavy and you just hold spot. And as long as you don't fully exit those anchor bags, I think you'll be in a good position to be constantly exposed to a macro bull run. And then other coins that go around that are lesser known or more risky, or especially these on-chain, even meme coin. Well, meme coins. I don't think, by the way, meme coins are a good return right now. Not like during the bear market where they was pretty much that was it. There's a lot of better options than meme coins. Um, but anyway, it's the anchor coins that you don't want to all out all in, and then for the rest, it's okay. And if you miss out, I think it's fine. But if it's a risky coin and you're up 100%, then yeah, take your principal out. I mean, let's roll. If it's a hot hand, yes, it probably could do a 10x, 20x. You never know, and uh, and so why you should always just sell half on a double, and you got your principal back. I could have done that with a couple coins. There's the one Veriswap or whatever it's called, VRSW, that was on MEXC, and I was even telling myself, oh, it's delisting. It's Polygon backed, and it's got AI narrative, but there's like nobody trading it. It's very thin liquidity on MEXC, and it was going through a delisting, and I was like, yeah, the listing's gonna pump it, um, and this taking this contrarian approach, and I didn't follow my own uh, rule of thumb. Well, I mean, I made out with it. So it got delisted. You can withdraw the token. Ended up having a little bit of liquidity on a DEX on Veriswap itself, and then I just I sold it for like a small 50% gain or something like that. I think I only threw like $1,000 or $2,000 in. But I violated my own rule because I was like, yeah, you got to buy these low liquidity shitcoins because they could do like a 20, 30x, and that's what it did. I think Doc from Moonshot is still holding that sucker. But yeah, I mean, like 2 weeks later, that shit went 50x or something. So that $1,000 bet would have been a 50K return. So I definitely would advise to always sell half on a double. And I get distracted. I mean, I've done this with last cycle with the People token, the Constitution DAO token, right? I got my refund. The Constitution didn't get bought. So you could take a refund, and I don't know why. I mean, I wasn't losing anything. I just refunded it, and then I didn't hold it, and then the People token went on to do like 100x or something. Could have made them a couple $1 million. But it is what it is. So you should always take half on a double when you've got the opportunity to do so, and if you don't have anything to lose, then just roll with it, right? But the anchor bags is what you should never fully sell.
Thank you for that, because that's
Yes.
one where I constantly see people struggle with it, and I was like, you guys need to know this lesson and translate it to you guys. Like, you're up, get some profits, but always kind of throw that in there. And I'm not saying like you're up on XRP, keep a bag of XRP. It's these new things that could possibly like moon like you wouldn't believe, because like you said, like Malvin and them, when they're going at it hard and they're talking, and like Freeman as well, when they're talking stuff, and it's like, man, this is obscure as hell. But you'll see occasionally some of those, man, it's like stuff they were looking at like 2 years ago. Had you just kept just the tiniest little piece of it, hell, that thing made it to Coinbase, and it'd be worth millions now if you'd have kept that moonback. So like, you're not going to regret like selling 90% or whatever like that, and keeping that anchor bag. So thank you for sharing that. I wanted to get that out of you since we started walking into it. because that's a really valuable lesson I've only seen in your group, or in that thing, and I've always appreciated it.
Yeah, and I think I've done a much better job this cycle picking Say as like the heavy anchor bag.
Yeah.
Last cycle it did well. I picked 4 or 5 anchor bags. Started with 3 and then added 4 and then added 5. And it was the thesis. You always want to have a thesis, okay? You always want to figure out what's the hottest narrative, what's the hottest thing that's going to be on centralized exchanges and with big backers, and what's the narrative that you think is going to be like the thing. And the last cycle was interoperability because you'd have all these new chains coming on. And so how do they all talk to each other? And so I said, well, let's bet on things that could build potential interoperability, and ended up being Cosmos, Polkadot, uh, and uh, Solana, and then later was Polygon. Well, Polygon was kind of an L2 play that became a new narrative. So you always want to start with like 3 or 4 coins with a really solid bet, but not too diverse. I think diversity could mm, it could, or especially in early stages, it could reduce your maximum potential. You don't want to diversify like right away. You diversify when you start having profits. Um, yes, it is. You have to make the right judgment call early on, but it's kind of easy. I mean, you don't. There's not a lot of options. Like right now, what's the narrative right now? And I think it's fast chains. The narrative right now is fast change because, at least on the grand scale, is because of Solana. Solana did very well. Solana made a roaring comeback. And so, what's the beta from that? It's going to be other fast chains. And then when you look at the other fast chains still having these huge backers, and they're all launching, these are newer tokens that are coming, you could probably make a safe thesis that these would be the anchor coins to bet on because fast chains is what has been the hot thing in terms of liquidity in the last couple months from Solana. And so rolling with those core anchor bags is very important. The now Say became a very big bag for me because I was tired of just being a trader, if I put it that way. Um, I wanted to really get information asymmetry. And I always have this running joke as well, and I say, um, to become a good crypto trader, you got to trade your way into insider information. And what I mean by that is gaining information asymmetry, basically an edge, right? So the chart is only going to work so well, and the real edge is being able to get information that is not publicly easily accessible. It could be publicly known, but there might be a little bit of um, logical gymnastic that you have to go through to really realize it, and putting some pieces of information together and then making a bet on that. And so, how do you get that kind of level of information? Well, either you are associated with the team or you're associated with the venture capital. And so, if you're just a trader, how can you achieve this? Well, I learned this kind of from an OG of Moonshot Crypto, the original founder of Moonshot Crypto, Donnie Crypto. And basically, he was making a killing in the ICO era in 2017 when Moonshot started. It was his group before he handed it over to me. But in the 2020, 2021 cycle, he just went hard on Solana. And he bought like at $3 or something and just went straight up Solana. And he got to know CMS Holdings. He got to know a whole bunch of Solana people because he just went hard on that shit. And he got to know a lot of folks that are influential in Solana, which let him have conviction, right? Maybe not even necessarily insider information, but the fact that he was talking and knowing what developments kind of were a little bit sooner or better or more in depth in terms of explanation than the general public, it helped him with his conviction. And so he just went hard on Solana. I mean, he bought a couple other things, but he just went like mostly Solana. And while everybody was dicking around, he just held and held and held and held, and all the way to like 200s or something. And he sold a bunch more on the way down. And he just said, "Fuck off, bear market," and he's gonna go and take it easy. And he made his killing on Solana. So I wanted to learn from that this cycle, even though I had the anchor coins as well last time, but it was just holding some big bags of assorted bags, right? Where this time I want to be so uh, invested in 1 or 2 tokens, in this case, Say, where I'm forced to constantly be in the loop in the news and know what's going on. And that's what I mean by information asymmetry. It's not so much trying to fully get like actual insider information, but being hyper aware of developments of a single project or two, and knowing the details rather than just the superficial shill of an influencer's post, and knowing what actually is going on because you have a full bird's eye view of all the developments, and that's how you also end up knowing, especially early on with these projects, and you end up getting to know people on the team. You get to know the backers, the marketers, the service companies that help these tokens, from market makers to marketing, um, and that's where you gain your edge, and helping to really uh, have better conviction in that way, right? So you have a thesis, then you substantiate your thesis, but then you also need a way to make sure you're constantly in tune with your bag, and that's the information. So it's very hard to do that when you're holding like 20 or 30 coins in your portfolio and being too diverse. You won't
Absolutely.
have that level of super sharp vision into the developments of your bags.
No, and I
So
don't care
that,
if you don't
yeah,
sleep, you don't work, you stare at charts full time. There's only so many things you can keep that pulse on.
yeah,
Because I remember Malvin and you guys started digging into some really, really deep, deep corners of the internet, and there was this information coming out on like the bit like how Say was built and the people behind it. And I remember reading that stuff, and I was like, dude, I couldn't even find this, but
yeah,
it's like backing kind of like some of the stuff I was seeing because I started trading it and I was watching like, hey, this print's volatile, but it always gets picked up on the liquidity side on the bottom. And I was like, dude, some big whales are in this. And then you start seeing that data come in, and it's like, hey, no one on Twitter's talking about this, but this lines up with like what I'm seeing. And that's why I the Q4 of last year, I walked through it in a stream, but I just told people, it's like I did a 6x on spot, and my spot little scalp account, I just traded two things. It was Tia and Say, and that was the only thing I focused on, and I kept my pulse on both of those, and just started going through it because part of it I realized too is like I can't out trade Say when it's running, so I'll let it do its thing, and when it has its like really really nice complete blowouts on some of the rainbow stuff, I'll scalp it and try to grow that bag. Um, but at the same time, it's I can't do those returns on something that doesn't have that pulse. Um, you can tell from my Aave returns at this point in comparison, but um, no, that's a really good lesson because that goes into like when I talk about like your trusted circle, your team, and now it turns into this asymmetrical monster where people are like building each other up with alpha and sharing information and wanting to help each other out and being, not turning it into a pissing match because that's one of the coolest things I've always noticed about your Discord and like kind of the group is like um, they build each other up and they'll definitely shun anybody like put someone down if someone comes in and like just blast disrespect and you don't appreciate what it is because it's not a pissing match. It's not, hey, I'm flexing, you're a piece of junk, I'm number one. It's always like, hey, let's figure this out together because it's been awesome to watch like some of the stuff that's been like talked about and discovered as well as all the funny stuff and just cracking up with all the different jokes that end up happening. But what are you pulling up here? APT and Sweet. Yeah, Sweet's the other one that I'm FOMOing that one bad, and shout out for Doc for still having that one and blowing out the liquidity with market buys.
yeah. Um, I had a bag of SWE, a fairly sizable bag, but I let it go. But I'm keeping an eye on it. I might buy it back in if this does a big pullback at some point. Let's say it pulls from a dollar, almost $2 now, and pulls back to the $1.20 something level. That would be a major buy for me. But I missed the ride. I sold this. I sold this at what,
It's not
$1.40 or something? I don't know, somewhere
it's not
around here.
nearly as volatile as I've seen like Tia and Say, but it doesn't care about pullbacks. It just keeps grinding.
Yeah, so that's the thing is, again, this is why you want to look at, who's behind these projects. Let's pull up Crypto Rank. Um, Sway was definitely one of the projects on my list. Is it bigger than Say? Oh, Say took over. Aha. Sui was actually less than. Sui was actually ahead of Say at some point. Okay, so so here's this is Crypto Rank, and you can go to their fundraising, and you can see, you know, who's in their raise, and clearly this one has, A16Z, Coinbase Ventures, Circle, so you know that native USDC is coming. That's super important, and Say has that now too. That was one of the pumps from when it went from like 13 cents and pumped. Um, but Circle is very important because if you that's a telling sign that it's going to have native USDC on the chain, and liquidity is everything, right? Because if you don't have native USDC on the chain, you're going to have to rely on other people to bridge shit in, and that's going to be a very limiting factor for liquidity. And when you have very little liquidity, you can't have whales participate because they're going to have massive slippage. So Circle is super important, and these top names, A16Z, Coinbase. I mean, if you click on these, you can see, it's a tier one VC. You can actually click the tier one VC. You can sort through
Is
all
that
the tier ones.
is that an official designation, or is that just like?
Now it's from them, but I mean, it's pretty good. I mean, it's
Well,
pretty close.
I love how they listed FTX Ventures as other.
Yeah, it got swapped to that, I guess, when FTX imploded. But yeah, I mean, these are good signs, and so then you want to look at tokenomics, things like what's the vesting schedule, right? So it gives you this nice at a glance thing. You can look at, what the investors, early contributors, investors, these are the ones that are going to be the ones that most likely are going to need to take profits. And so you can see that this is vested until, what is this here? Next unlock in 77 days. Oh, so the cliff is till what? 1 year cliff? Why is this not clear? Well, somewhere in August. I mean, somewhere in before May here. Oh, it's May 2nd. I realize I'm looking at February 5th. I'm living in Mariboro land. So this is backwards. So yeah, it's May 2nd, not February 5th. Okay. So yeah, you want to look at that, and you've got some time, and usually these are good insights in whether it'll have less sellers and lower float. But then obviously you want to look at the chart, the technical setup. You want to look at also the obviously the narrative. So the narrative for SWE and is similar to Aptos, where it uses the move language, which is basically formerly known as Facebook's DM language. So it has some of that narrative there. It's something interesting and new, and it's supposed to be a fast chain as well. And it's got a war chest liquidity incentive. So when the liquidity incentive started kicking in, that's when we kind of went on a tear here. Uh, Aptos is looking interesting though. I mean, it's kind of making this U pattern.
Did that on the lower time frames, it bottomed hard and it ran. I know a lot of guys who chased that particular run right there up on leverage, and it was just nuts. And they're like, I don't know why it's pumping. I was like, the founder looks awesome.
You're talking about Aptos or SWE?
Aptos.
Yeah, I never really got into Aptos. I don't even know much about the Aptos eco, but I'll have to look into that because the chart's kind of looking interesting.
It was
right
only very very short time frames they were trading it because it'll hunt your liquidity back. It's so volatile.
Yeah, SWE's good. I like SWE. I'm going to keep an eye on that for a pullback. I hate Polkadot. We're not even going to talk about that. Tau, though, that's the other bag that I've got. Not much left. I sold 90% of my bag. But goddamn, look at this monster.
I don't even know what to say on this one because the market cap is insane and it's not even. I don't even think you can buy it in the United States technically. Did Kraken get it? I'd have to check. That one just blew target after target. And I was like, there's no way this is going to go top 20 or whatever, and it just kept trucking.
I mean, they still have almost 89% of their holders staking right now, and I think it's such a good narrative. AI, decentralized AI. They got demonstrations of the product, in action, and the fact that it's got this Bitcoin like emission schedule for mining or staking in this case. It's got a nice again reference point because now you know what Bitcoin did, but It's got the same supply, the same emission schedule, 4-year happening, and you're like, damn, I'm in generation zero right now. I definitely want to keep this staked because one day, especially with AI being in the mainstream now, 10 years from now, who knows? But Tensor Tau could really be facilitating an alternative to centralized AI modeling, because computers just get so powerful, and we've got this neural net of multiple computers that are just pumping out data. It's a very, very compelling narrative, and and that you can see a testament to that with 89% of people staked right now. Crazy, man, crazy.
Big Barry Silbert bag.
Very cultish too.
Yeah.
Very, and this reminds me of again these early ETH days. I mean, you go on the website with these little tiny freaking words, and they got a full blown white paper, uh, which we haven't seen in a very long time. Not very flashy, not very markety, but yet you've got all these 89% stakers, people that are actually building all this GitHub content. And it's not just simply like updating a single like space or something. Like it's actually code being contributed. Very enthusiastic community. Love to see it. And this is the type of like ETH like run, in my opinion. And it's good to have a little bit of exposure. So I'm going to keep that 10% probably for a very long time, maybe multiple cycles even. Who knows? But I'm very glad to have gotten at this $50 level, literally at the bottom here. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, right before the run up. Too bad I sold a lot here though. Obviously on the downtrend, I was like, Jesus, I'm $50 now up to 300, 350. I'm gonna take some profits, but look at this monster. I even said, is this going to 1K eventually? I think it's gonna be true, but too bad I'll only have 10% of that.
Yeah, it's that one is so violent. I'm scared to touch it. But it's just I've watched it go to 100 to 200 to 300, and I'm just like, okay, well, I need to cope in other ways and buy some Zcash.
Yeah.
Um, I want to
You.
go ahead.
Mhm. I was just saying, I mean, we're coming up to the 2 hour mark. I don't know if you want to like open it up to your audience to ask any questions.
Yeah, for sure. So when this ends, I don't know if you want to hop on, but we can. They can always hop in the chat. But I'm gonna go run over to the Discord and open that up. And if you want to come
Okay.
along and and hang out with the guys, that's totally welcome. You know where to find us, and I'll post it up in the
Sure.
Discord. But and I'm respecting of the time as well because there's a big thing I wanna walk you into and see if you could talk about it. And I'm gonna send you a tweet in the DMs, and I'm gonna put the be right back screen, and I want to see. I want you to read this or know what I'm talking about before I walk into it. There you go. So they can't see your screen right now, so you can read it real quick.
Okay. Okay. About the Saiyan token. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I'll switch it to my screen real quick, and
Okay.
this is something I wanted to walk into because this is a big deal. Because I've watched a lot of projects get vetted by you, and I've seen projects uh, get pushed on a lot of stuff. Um, and get picked up off the ground, and then all these people find out it's such hard work and they bail, and I've seen you like keep pushing through with them. um, and this is one that's in hindsight makes perfect sense to me. um, of course, the Dragon Ball Z memed crypto trader that um, I've seen through thick and thin, all of a sudden now there's a Saiyan token tied to say this just seems like a match made in heaven. um, and it's like, why didn't we all think of this before? And I just wanted to see if we could walk through the story of this impulse of basically kind of creating what was seen as a meme token actually evolve into a monster, um, of having utility and getting major listings and getting support, as well as having like your moonshot community come in hard on it and back you to back one of their OGs, one of the guys they support. And just curious if you could unpack that, because a lot of people take, oh yeah, he's 9K and he just did the side token, but there's a lot of like lessons learned that you've had through the cycles that led you to this moment to be able to get this off the ground.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's heck of a journey for that. That I gotta start with that. I mean, not just this project in itself, but also going through, um, advising and working on other projects. I think this is the first project that I'm basically like leading with other team members. Um, Whereas other projects that I was involved in before, kind of like I was helping out and ended up picking more responsibilities, and I guess I became like the face of it because I've got an influencer account, and but they weren't really my projects. I think I launched one meme token very long time ago in 2021 called like LOLs, where it was like 10K. I
I
seeded
still have
10K.
that.
I still have that. I think it's still above its listing price, which was pulling 10K LOLs tokens with 10K USDC, and I think it's still locked in the liquidity pool to like 2026 or something in the Unicrypt. Um, but that was like my first foray into like an actual token, and unfortunately there wasn't too much I could do with it to follow through, because I realized it's a really dumb idea to LP the entire thing and not have any tokens yourself. I didn't snipe my own thing. I don't really like to do that. So I had just no tokens. I had to like buy it pretty high from somebody else and or from the market, or ask for donations. And uh, and so that was a lesson where you got to make sure there's team tokens, all right? Or there's some motivation or there's some incentive that you can also give out to build other team members. And I just couldn't do it myself. There's nothing I could really spend time to build on. And then again, other projects, I was pulled into and somehow got intimately involved in. And so those were all learning lessons for me, until I finally ended up with the Saiyan token. And Saiyan token is definitely very fitting because of my Cell over 9000 persona. Um, my alter ego is basically Vegeta from Dragon Ball Z, hence the 9000 part. And I was like, okay, well, Saiyan is perfect. And I even said it early on. As soon as I started buying Say, I even mentioned, I think there's a November something post in my own Discord channels where I said, man, these guys really got to call it Saiyan. Sailor is the dumbest thing. Why didn't they call them Saiyans so you can go Super Saiyan? And I've been saying that really early. And then I guess, a lot of other people had the same thinking, and it happens to be uh, Hasaka, Ansem, they were thinking the same thing and they put it out publicly. And I guess it influenced enough of the Say team to put out a poll, and because they realized how memeable and viral it could be, and they just put out a poll. It's like, should we change the Sailor or Saiyan? And Sailor was winning for some reason in the poll, and I was like, this is ridiculous. I was like, well, somebody's got to launch a Saiyan token and deal with this to kind of influence the vote. And then I was glad to see that there were people launching it. I was like, yeah, let me buy the Saiyan token. Until I realized it was like 12 different Saiyan tokens. And I was like, absolutely, there's gonna be a rug pull, and I don't want to get rugged, and I don't want to have the Saiyan name wasted because of some bad association with rug pulls. I want the Saiyan name to win as the community sort of audience name. And that's when I decided to just quickly announce that I'm going to LP a Saiyan token. I think I have if you go back in my timeline, you can find a December 19th tweet that I just said, I don't want to get rugged, and we're just going to LP and create a Saiyan token. And that it all started from there. I mean, token goes live, launched the Discord. Launched Discord with like 2,000 people joining within like the first 2 hours, an hour or two, and I didn't have a team, and I was like, "Yo, who wants to be on the team?" And there was like 20 different people that said, "Yeah." And the first 20 something people that said they want to be on the team, I just made them a team member, and we just went with it, ran with it. I mean, it was a messed up launch. We had contract snipers. There was problems with Astroport. There was a huge dump. Um, I got the death threats, and people called it a rug pull, blah blah blah. And I was like, well, I have a giant say bag, okay, guys? So I can't mess this up. I'm trying to build something that's going to actually represent the say ecosystem properly, because there's literally like one other tiny coin dealing with, it was like Poker Kings or something, dealing with non really, meme or DeFi stuff. So Saiyan token is probably like gonna be de facto traded token because there's literally nothing else to trade on Say. So with all eyes on Say, it ended up being Saiyan token. All these big buys started coming in. Whales started coming in. Moonshot fam started coming in. And big shout out to those guys because I think they're literally acting like whale support for for the token as well. Um, so so yeah, I mean it just got crazy, and I just quickly had a team, just random ass anon team, and eventually whoever was still active and delivered um, started sticking around, and the rest got culled down, and we ended up with like now it's like 8 members, and we recruited 2 more along the way, and so it's a 10-member team, and pitching in from business development to coding, to graphics, and it's been great. It's been great. Haven't sold any of my Sane tokens. In fact, I think I bought some more. You know, it's my own big bet. You know, at some point, yes, I'm probably gonna sell some tokens. Maybe I'll even collateralize and take a loan out and go buy a big house like the Curve guy, right? But for now, you know, I'm doing this because I have a giant say position,
Yeah.
and I really want to see the say ecosystem be successful. And saying, yeah, it's great to have some tokens. I mean, I bought tokens. I spent my own say to acquire Saiyan tokens, defending support levels and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, I just want to see the project be successful in helping the Say ecosystem really flourish, given that it is the most liquid and well, or one of the most liquid, and it is the most volume traded token right now on Say. Um, just did our first centralized exchange listing as well. For those who don't know, first Say token to go on a centralized exchange,
Congratulations
as
on
well
that
as a
officially. I'm
thank you,
just going to
thank
go
you.
ahead and say it. Well, I'm sorry.
Yes, and so that's been really great because it now paves the way with existing infrastructure for other tokens to list from Say. So I really want to see Say be successful. And so Saying being successful will help Say be successful and vice versa. And I really want to have the Koreans be right with $10 targets.
That's awesome. No, thank you for that because that's been awesome. And it's just like, I was like, some people don't know the story. And I was like, 9K got mad and didn't want Sailor to win. Like, forget this. We're going to take this home and do it proper. So it's awesome and root for you guys. And I just keep seeing updates keep coming from the team. And then you actually see like the Say team guys, their founders, like pushing and like the Saiyans like developing all this cool stuff that allows like actual functional utility. It's real impressive. It's not just like, hey, we put a hat on it and did some Dragon Ball Z gifs. I can switch over
This
to
chart
screen
is
if you
actually
want.
looking pretty good.
Let me
If I was a trader, not financial advice, by the way, since this is my own token, I can't be shilling this thing. But if I was a trader, I would just, as an unbiased, look at this. This is a pretty good looking chart.
yeah.
Um, it's so funny. I remember this, like zooming in and just looking back into this first candle here, and obviously the candle is like much bigger. Um, this was the launch. Whoa, what happened?
I remember this vividly, and I remember Freeman like hitting me up in the DMs.
This crazy
Candle.
launch here. I mean, the candle was like this big at the time, right? And this massive dump. This is where everybody got mad. It was like this is crazy. Somebody made like 300K on this candle or something because they sniped like 30%. Contract sniped it, and this was like for my first foray into Cosm Wasm, and I didn't even realize that you could contract snipe directly from the metadata on the actual say scanner. But then I got like death threats and death wishes here. But then look what happened, just like went crazy, and just kept going. And then it did this thing, and we thought that was like 0.022 cents was like that's the top. Sorry, end of the meme coin, it's dead, and just does this bleed until it then rampages and just rampages, just insane, And it was just, I remember like the developments in the Discord on the team was just so much enthusiasm, that we had like all these big ambitions to build all these things, and we really had to ground ourselves in reality. It was like we got to stick to the core stuff that we want to build. But yeah, it was good times, good times.
That was cool, and it's real building, and the whole time it's like it's fun, like
Yeah.
it's fun. Well, 9K, thanks for coming on. We've hit 2 hour mark. I can't thank you enough, and we got majority of what I wanted to kind of introduce because I was looking back at this and I was like, I just realizing like my guys don't understand like what 9K is, who he really is, and like what you mean to me because you've helped me out so many times throughout these years, and a lot of the stuff that's influences from the Moonshot Group and all those guys is rubbed off on me and helped me build a lot of stuff. So I wanted to do that and like, hey, this is I wanted to properly introduce and go into this backstory. So thanks for hanging out with us for 2 hours or so and going through this history and stuff. So I really appreciate it. And you're welcome back anytime. You fell for the invite trick this time. I don't know if I'll convince you again, but we're going to wrap up here. And we're gonna go. I'm gonna go hop over to the Discord. If 9K wants to hang out, that's more than welcome to. But I know he's got kids and stuff, and it's getting late,
Oh,
so can't
kiddos
guarantee
asleep.
it.
I'll hang up for a little bit. Yeah, I'll join you guys if you want to talk.
Badass, awesome. So if you guys are not part of the Discord where we'll be, I'll do. If you go back to the main website, rainbow-trends.com, the link is in the top because sometimes Discord links get a little weird. So if you go to the very top, you click the Discord community, it'll take you right to the Rainbow Trends one. So thanks for everybody logged in. This has been an awesome stream. It's going to take me a long time to get a bunch of these alpha clips out of it. But thanks again, 9K, and thanks for all the guys who hung out with us in the chat. And if you got some questions, go hit us up in the Discord. We're going to go do the roundtable. I'll see you guys later.
Cool, thanks.